Welcome everyone to a deep dive into extraterrestrial encounters, which will cover a bunch of accounts of people encountering things that are way out of the ordinary. From detailed abduction stories to just simple flying saucer sightings, this video will have a mix of a bunch of things related to extraterrestrial life with a bunch of interesting stories. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video now with the first entry of Tier 1. Betty Andrea Sun case. Betty Andrea Sun's alleged extraterrestrial involvement in 1967, widely referred to as the Andrea Sun affair, is one of the early controversial cases in UFO research. It was notably detailed by Raymond Fowler in several books, starting with the Andrea Sun affair in 1979. The incident reportedly began on January 25, 1967, in Massachusetts. It's said that during a family gathering, a power outage occurred, and a strange pink light attracted the attention of Andrea Sun's father. He reported seeing small, Halloween-like creatures outside. The next day, life seemed normal, but Andrea Sun felt that something unusual had definitely happened, experiencing flashbacks of humanoid creatures in an otherworldly setting. It was not until 1977, under hypnosis, that she recalled the full extent of the experience. Her account suggests that after her father noticed the creatures, the entire family was immobilized. It said that after that, small gray beings then entered the house, communicated telepathically with her, and then transported her aboard the spacecraft. The process involved her passing through solid objects and floating towards the disc-shaped craft. While aboard the spacecraft, Andrea Sun described undergoing medical examinations, including probing with needles and the removal of a small object from her head. Following these procedures, she had a visionary encounter with the being she interpreted as God due to her Christian faith. This being informed her that she was chosen for a special purpose. The beings conveyed a message of love for humanity and advised that humans should study nature to overcome self-destructive behaviors. But yeah, essentially, her story extended back to her childhood and continued to develop with new experiences into the 1990s after her marriage to Bob Luca, who also reported similar encounters. Despite the attention from UFO researchers and inclusion in broad studies of abductions, the Andrea Sun affair has not really reached a consensus in the research community. Explanations proposed by skeptics range from psychological phenomenon to outright fabrication, but none have definitely explained her experiences. Her claims remain integrated with her religious views, portraying them as part of a divine governance. Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter. The Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter is a well-documented event from 1955, where residents of Kelly and Hopkinsville in Christian County, Kentucky, reported an extended encounter with what they claimed were extraterrestrial beings. This incident is also referred to as the Hopkinsville Goblins case or Kelly Green Men case. It stands out in UFO folklore because of the duration of the encounter and the number of witnesses involved. Basically, on the evening of August 21, 1955, 5 adults and 7 children from the Sutton family arrived at the local police station in a distressed state. They reported that creatures from a spaceship had been attacking their farmhouse and that they had defended themselves by shooting at these beings for nearly 4 hours. Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, 2 adults from the group, described the beings as short, dark figures who repeatedly appeared at the doorway and windows of the home. The group's claims prompted a significant response from local law enforcement and military personnel. Police officers, state troopers, deputy sheriffs, and military police from the nearby U.S. Army Fort Campbell were dispatched to the Sutton farmhouse. Their investigation found evidence of gunfire and damage to the property, like holes in the windows and door screens, but there wasn't any physical evidence of the alien creatures that was discovered. The descriptions of the creatures also varied, with reports stating that they were about 2 to 4 feet tall with large pointed ears, claw-like hands, and eyes that glowed yellow. These descriptions became more elaborate over time in various media reports. Skeptics, though, have suggested that the family may have misidentified local wildlife, like great horned owls, which are known for their defensive behavior, silent flight, and a yellow-eyed gaze. The presence of meteors in the sky at the time was also suggested as a possible trigger for the initial sighting by Billy Ray Taylor. Ufologists have also thoroughly investigated the case, with some suggesting that the beings could be extraterrestrial or interdimensional in origin. However, skepticism still remains high because of the lack of physical evidence and the plausible explanations involving local wildlife and heightened emotions among the witnesses. Project Blue Book, the US Air Force's study of UFOs, officially listed the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter as a hoax, although this categorization is still debated by some researchers. The incident has had a lasting impact on pop culture though, inspiring films, books, and even a Pokemon character, and is celebrated annually in Kelly, Kentucky with the Little Green Men Days Festival. Nordic Aliens. Nordic aliens are described in ufology as humanoid extraterrestrials from the Pleiades, who bear close resemblance to Nordic Scandinavian humans. They're often depicted as tall, ranging from 6 to 7 feet, with long blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. These beings were first popularized by George Adamski in the 1950s, who was among the earliest to claim contact with them. The narrative around Nordic aliens typically emphasizes their beauty, telepathic abilities, and benevolent nature, often associated with spiritual growth and the protection of Earth and its ecology. And the concept of Nordic aliens might have been influenced by cultural representations in media, notably the 1951 film The Day the Earth Stood Still, where an aesthetically appealing extraterrestrial arrives on Earth with a warning about nuclear weapons. This portrayal aligns with the descriptions of Nordic aliens as wise, peaceful beings concerned with human welfare and global issues. Throughout the 1950s and onwards, numerous individuals in Europe and America claimed to have had encounters with these aliens. Unlike other extraterrestrial claims involving abductions or aggressive interactions, encounters with Nordics are often described as really peaceful and enlightening, focusing on spiritual teaching and mutual respect between species. These beings are frequently connected with messages about the importance of peace and environmental care. Publications by contactees like George Adamski's Flying Saucers Have Landed and Inside the Spaceships, Howard Menger's From Outer Space to You, and Travis Walton's The Walton Experience recount detailed narratives of personal encounters with these beings. Over time, as the gray aliens became more prevalent in abduction narratives, reports of encounters with Nordic aliens diminished, but still remained a significant part of ufology. Falkville Metal Man. The Metal Man of Falkville, Alabama, is a case from October 17, 1973, involving a supposed extraterrestrial sighting. Chief Jeff Greenhaw, who was the local police chief, responded to a report of a spaceship landing in a field. Upon arrival, no spaceship was found, but Greenhaw encountered a figure that appeared humanoid, wearing a suit resembling shiny aluminum foil. The suit was described as intensely bright and smooth, with the entity moving in a mechanical, sort of robotic manner. It featured an antenna on its head and lacked a distinct separation between the neck and head. The entity also moved with unusual speed, estimated by Greenhaw to be faster than any human could ever run. After attempting to communicate with it without success, Greenhaw took photographs of the figure before it fled. The chief pursued the entity in his vehicle, but was unable to keep pace despite reaching speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. The aftermath of the incident was significant for Greenhaw. His report and the photographs did not convince authorities or the public. He was then dismissed from his job, his marriage ended, and his home was destroyed by fire. These events contribute to the ongoing UFO conspiracy theories and underscore the social risks faced by individuals reporting such encounters. Analysis of the photographs taken by Greenhaw also yielded no definite conclusions, with some suggesting a fabrication influenced by other contemporary UFO cases, like the Pascagoula Abduction. The images showed what some interpreted as a spaceship, though this remains speculative. 2006 O'Hare International Airport sighting UFO. The 2006 O'Hare International Airport UFO sighting is a notable event where multiple witnesses reported seeing an unidentified flying object hovering over the airport. On November 7, 2006, at about 4:15 p.m., 12 employees from United Airlines and a few witnesses outside the airport observed a metallic, saucer-shaped object above gate C-17. Despite the clear presence of the object witnessed by pilots, airline management, mechanics, and ramp workers, it didn't appear on radar, and air traffic controllers did not see it. Witnesses described the UFO as silent, dark gray, and sized between 6 to 24 feet in diameter. It reportedly hovered over the gate for several minutes before shooting upwards at high speed, leaving a clear blue hole in the cloud layer, which seemed to close shortly afterward. This event caught the attention of the media and was reported by major outlets like CNN, CBS, and the Chicago Tribune. The Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, determined that the sighting was a weather phenomenon and didn't pursue further investigation, which was kind of controversial given the number of credible witnesses. This decision led to criticism from UFO investigators and the general public, who felt that the incident deserved more scrutiny because of the potential safety implications for flight operations. The National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomenon took the incident seriously and produced a detailed 155-page report. They then called for a formal government inquiry and better detection technology, highlighting the risk to aviation safety if such objects could appear at major airports without being detected by existing radar technology. Sawway F Spaceman. The Sawway F Spaceman photograph remains one of the most interesting and debated images related to UFO sightings. Captured on May 23, 1964 by Jim Templeton, a firefighter and photographer, the photograph shows his daughter on Berwick Marsh near Sawway Firth in Cumberland, England. It basically shows what's appearing to be a mysterious figure in what appears to be a spacesuit in the background. Jim Templeton was certain that there were no other people in the vicinity when he took the photo, particularly not anyone resembling the figure in the image. The photo was developed by Kodak, and according to Templeton, the company confirmed that the image was not tampered with or altered. Kodak even offered a reward to anyone who could prove that the photo was faked, a reward that was never claimed. The photograph gained a lot of attention and was featured in various newspapers, linked to interest being caught by UFO enthusiasts. Jim Templeton claimed that after the image was published, he was visited by two men who claimed to be from the government, who questioned him about the photo and then left abruptly when he explained he had not seen the spaceman at the time the photo was taken. In addition to the public and media interest, the photograph coincided with the report that a Blue Streak missile test at the Woomera test range in Australia was aborted because of figures resembling the one in Templeton's photo being seen on the test range. This added another layer of mystery and conspiracy theory to the narrative surrounding the Sawway F Spaceman. Skeptics and researchers, though, have offered more mundane explanations for the figure in the photograph. Notably, journalist and UFO researcher David Clark suggested in 2014 that the figure was likely Templeton's wife, Annie, who was present that day and was seen in other photographs taken at the same location. Clark posited that because of the camera's viewfinder not showing the entire frame, Templeton simply did not see his wife enter the shot. Annie was wearing a pale blue dress which could appear white and overexposed, thus resembling a spacesuit. Battle of Los Angeles. The Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, refers to an incident during World War II that occurred in the early hours of February 25, 1942, in Los Angeles, California. Initially thought to be an attack by Japanese forces, this event was marked by the mass firing of anti-aircraft artillery into the night sky, triggered by reported sightings of unidentified aerial objects. Despite the intense military response, no enemy aircraft were officially reported or recovered, and the incident was later attributed to war nerves and a possible weather balloon. The incident began with a blackout declared across Los Angeles County following the detection of an unidentified object by radar installations. Air raid sirens then went off and a total blackout was enforced. Anti-aircraft batteries then began firing at the reported objects, launching over 1,400 shells into the air. The intense artillery response caused damage to property and led to the deaths of 5 civilians because of car accidents and heart attacks induced by the stress of the situation. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox soon after dismissed the incident as a false alarm caused by anxiety and war nerves. However, this explanation didn't satisfy all, and speculation continued about the possible causes and nature of the perceived threat. Some suggested that commercial airplanes might have been misidentified as enemy aircrafts, or that light planes could have been launched from Japanese submarines to cause panic or scout the area. This event also fueled long-term conspiracy theories and speculation that the target of the artillery was an extraterrestrial spacecraft. This belief was partly encouraged by the photograph published by the Los Angeles Times, showing searchlight beams converging on an unidentified object in the sky, a photo that was later confirmed to have been retouched before publication. UFO enthusiasts have since pointed to this event as evidence of government interactions with extraterrestrial phenomena. Alien Autopsy. Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, is a pseudo-documentary released in 1995, which presents grainy black and white footage claiming to depict the autopsy of an alien being. This footage was asserted to be associated with the Roswell incident of 1947. The film was initially broadcast by Fox Television and hosted by Jonathan Frakes, gaining substantial attention and sparking a lot of debate about its authenticity. The footage was later revealed to be a hoax though, orchestrated by British entrepreneur Ray Santilli. He admitted that the film was a reconstruction of an alleged original he had viewed but could not obtain, claiming that the original footage deteriorated before he could make a copy. Santilli's account and the nature of the film led to a lot of media coverage though and public scrutiny. The hoax was constructed with a budget set up in London. The alien body examined in the film was actually a fabricated construct made from plaster casts filled with various organic materials like sheep brains and raspberry jam to simulate their internal organs. John Humphreys, an artist and sculptor, designed the alien bodies and also played the role of the chief examiner in the footage to manage the autopsy effects accurately. Despite initial claims of authenticity, multiple participants and experts quickly debunked the footage as a fabricated piece. Critical analysis pointed out numerous inconsistencies within the film that didn't align with the supposed 1947 setting. Also, the documentary titled Eamon Investigates Alien Autopsy, presented by Eamon, featured detailed admissions by Santilli and his fellow producer Gary Schofield regarding how the hoax was crafted and executed. The impact of Alien Autopsy and pop culture was notable though. It was referenced and parodied in various media, including episodes of The X-Files, which itself frequently dealt with themes of government cover-ups and extraterrestrial phenomena. Also, the 2006 comedy film Alien Autopsy humorously portrays the behind-the-scene aspects of the hoax creation and its subsequent cultural impact. Pascagoula Abduction. The Pascagoula Abduction is an alleged UFO sighting and alien abduction event that occurred in 1973 near Pascagoula, Mississippi. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, two men fishing on the Pascagoula River, claimed they encountered an unidentified flying object and were abducted by aliens. On the evening of October 11, 1973, Hickson, age 42, and Parker, age 19, reported hearing a strange whirring sound and observing two blue lights and an oval-shaped object about 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. They described being paralyzed and levitated into the craft by three entities with robotic appearances, including crab-like pincers and slit-like mounts. Inside the craft, they claimed to undergo a physical examination involving mechanical devices. The two men's report attracted a lot of media attention and scrutiny. Following the incident, Hickson was more vocal about his experience, giving numerous interviews and lectures, even writing a book titled UFO Contact at Pascagoula and claiming further encounters with extraterrestrials. Parker, initially less forthcoming, eventually became more involved in the UFO community, wrote a book detailing his experiences, and even founded a company related to UFO investigations. In 2018, a historical marker was placed at the site of the alleged abduction, signifying its impact on the local community and ongoing public fascination with the case. Both Hickson and Parker, though, passed away in 2011 and 2023 respectively. Altogether, though, the case has been met with skepticism from various quarters. Notable skeptics like Philip J. Klass and Joe Nickell highlighted discrepancies in Hickson and Parker's account and suggested psychological explanations like hallucinations. Despite this, though, some local witnesses corroborated seeing an unusual aircraft, which added a layer of complexity to the debunking efforts. Crop circles. Crop circles, also known as crop formations or corn circles, are patterns created by flattening crops, typically cereals. The phenomenon gained a lot of attention in the late 20th century, although reports date back to the 17th century with natural and supernatural explanations proposed over time. The modern concept of crop circles began appearing more frequently in the 1970s though in England, with the complexity and number of formations increasing significantly into the 1980s and beyond. These formations often appear overnight, although some have been reported to form during the day. Crop circles have also been found worldwide, with a significant concentration in southern England. In 1991, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley claimed responsibility for many of the formations, stating that they created them in 1978 using simple tools like plank of wood and ropes. This revelation pointed to human involvement as the primary cause of most crop circles, although this didn't really deter various alternative theories about their origins, including paranormal and extraterrestrial explanations. Crop circles often occur near roads, populated areas, and historic sites like Stonehenge, suggesting that they're more likely to be human-made. Researchers note that the locations are easily accessible, which further supports the theory of human involvement. Despite the predominance of evidence towards human creators though, some continue to believe in paranormal causes, often citing changes in the biological structure of the affected crops, unusual residues, and other anomalies as evidence of non-human origins. The formations are not random but show mathematical and geometric precision, leading to theories involving advanced technologies like GPS and lasers for their creation. Despite these sophisticated methods though, the basic technique of flattening crops with boards and ropes remains prevalent among known circle makers. The Allagash Abduction. The Allagash abductions involve 4 men, Jack Weiner, Jim Weiner, Chuck Rack, and Charlie Foltz, who reported an extraterrestrial encounter and subsequent abduction in the Maine wilderness in 1976. The case is notable because of the detailed accounts from the individuals involved, their undergoing of hypnosis to recover memories, and their passing of polygraph tests. The event took place during a camping trip in the Allagash wilderness when the group witnessed a bright unidentified flying object. This sighting occurred multiple nights during their trip, with the most significant encounter happening while they were night fishing. They attempted to communicate with the UFO using a flashlight, which seemingly triggered a response from the object as it then moved closer to them. Under hypnosis, years later, each man independently reported similar experiences of being abducted and subjected to invasive medical examinations aboard the craft. They described encounters with non-human beings who performed tests and took samples from them. And these accounts were pretty consistent among all 4 men and included details of the environment and procedures they could not have consciously remembered. The legitimacy of their claims has been both supported and questioned though. Supporters cite the men's consistency in recounting the event under hypnosis and their passing of polygraph tests. Skeptics though point to the influence of popular media on the abduction narrative and suggest that such memories could be fabrications stemming from psychological phenomenon or the suggestibility induced by hypnosis. Critics argue that the alien abduction experience may be shaped by cultural and media influences, as such narratives often reflect common themes present in science fiction. Also, some suggest that the high stress of the encounter could have led to false memories or hallucinations, influenced by their isolated and vulnerable setting in the wilderness. Barney and Betty Hill case. The Barney and Betty Hill case, also known as the Hill abduction, is one of the most documented and widely publicized alleged alien abductions in history. It occurred on the night of September 19 to 20, 1961, when the couple claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrials in a rural area of New Hampshire. Basically, the event goes that Betty and Barney Hill were returning from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal, driving through a secluded part of New Hampshire. According to their accounts, at around 10:30 p.m., Betty noticed a bright point of light in the sky that moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter. Concerned and curious at the same time, they both stopped the car and used binoculars to observe the object, which Barney initially thought was a commercial airliner, but later realized it was something else as it descended rapidly towards them. The object, described as large, silent, and illuminated, eventually hovered about 80 to 100 feet above their car. Barney, armed with a pistol, stepped out of the car for a closer inspection. Through binoculars, he claimed to see humanoid figures peering out of the craft's window. One figure communicated with Barney, telling him to stay where he was and keep looking. Subsequently, red lights then appeared on the craft, and a structure descended from it. After the encounter, the Hills experienced distress and confusion. It's said that they arrived home later than expected, and noticed inexplicable damages to their clothing and vehicle. Barney's shoes and the binoculars' strap were damaged, and Betty's dress was torn. They reported shiny, concentric circles on their car's trunk that reacted strangely when a compass was placed near them. The Hills suffered from anxiety and sleep disturbances following the event as well. Betty had a series of vivid dreams about the encounter, which included details of being examined aboard the craft. These dreams were consistent with some of the elements later recalled under hypnosis. The Hills reported their experience to the United States Air Force and were interviewed by Major James McDonald from Pease Air Force Base and by NICIP, which is the National Investigations Community on Aerial Phenomenon, investigator Walter Webb. Their story gained a lot of attention after it was leaked to the press in 1965. To recover lost memories of the incident, both Barney and Betty underwent sessions with Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist and neurologist. Under hypnosis, they provided consistent but fragmented accounts of the abduction. Barney recalled being directed by the humanoids to close his eyes, while Betty shared more detailed interactions, including a conversation with the leader of the beings. The scientific community, though, has largely been skeptical of the Hills' account. Some suggested that the stress and isolation of the event might have led to a shared hallucination, or that the late hour and fatigue might have contributed to a misinterpretation of natural or man-made objects. Domston Blobs Encounter. The Domston Blobs are creatures originating from a modern UFO legend in Sweden. They were first reported in 1958 following an incident that allegedly occurred in Domston, which is a small village. According to the account, two men were confronted by several blob-like entities with the ability to attempt the abduction of humans. These entities are described as gray, blob-like creatures relatively small in stature, about 4 feet tall. They're noted for the lack of distinct facial or bodily features, making them more mysterious and fear-inducing. The blobs are said to possess a near unbreakable grip and exceptional speed, attributes that facilitated their attempt to pull the witnesses into the spacecraft. The encounter reportedly took place in a secluded area where the men were suddenly approached by these blobs. Despite their small size, the creatures demonstrated formidable strength and agility. The men attempted to defend themselves but found the blobs difficult to fend off, as the creatures seemed to anticipate and evade their defensive maneuvers effectively. The incident escalated until the arrival of external interference, specifically the sound of car horns, which seemingly startled the creatures. This disturbance allowed the men a chance to escape as the blobs hastily retreated to the spacecraft and departed. Following this encounter, there were no subsequent reports or sightings of these specific entities. Flatwoods Monster. The Flatwoods Monster, also known as the Braxton County Monster or the Green Monster, is a creature that was reported to have been sighted in Flatwoods, West Virginia on September 12, 1952. The event basically occurred after a bright object was observed crossing the night sky. Over 50 years after the event, investigators, including Joe Nickel of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, suggested that the light may have been a meteor and the creature a misidentified barn owl. But about the sighting itself, it happened around 7:15 p.m. when two brothers, Edward and Fred May, along with their friend Tommy Heyer, observed a bright object landing on the property of local farmer G. Bailey Fisher. They reported their sighting to Kathleen May, who, along with the boys Neil Nunley, Ronnie Shaver, and National Guardsman Eugene Lemon, went to investigate. Upon reaching the site, they purportedly saw a pulsing red light, and Lemon directed his flashlight towards it, revealing a tall figure with a red face surrounded by a pointed, hood-like shape. Descriptions of the creature varied, but typically included a height of around 10 feet, a face described as blood red and round, and a body that was either dark black or green. The creature was also said to have small, claw-like hands, and was wearing something that resembled a pleated green skirt. According to reports, the group fled when the figure made a hissing sound and started gliding towards them. Following the encounter, the group reported smelling a pungent mist, and some even experienced nausea, which were later attributed by some researchers to hysteria and overexertion. The local sheriff and deputy who investigated the site after the incident reportedly found nothing. And the night of the sighting, a meteor was observed across Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, which Nichol and others believe may account for the bright light seen by the witnesses. Also, 3 flashing red aircraft beacons in the area could explain the red light seen pulsating by the group. Nichol also noted that the topography and foliage of the area could have contributed to the misidentification of a startled barn owl as a monstrous figure. Falcon Lake Incident. The Falcon Lake Incident is particularly noted for its detailed documentation and the extensive involvement of both Canadian and American authorities in its investigation. It occurred on May 28, 1967 at Falcon Lake in Manitoba, Canada, and involves the claims of Stefan Michalak, who experienced a close encounter with an unidentified flying object. Michalak, an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist, was prospecting in Whiteshell Provincial Park when he reported seeing 2 cigar-shaped objects with a reddish glow descending close to him. One of the objects landed near him, transforming into a disc shape upon landing, while the other flew away. He described the landed craft as being highly polished, metallic with a hue of stainless steel, and about 34 feet long and 15 feet high. The craft emitted a strong odor of sulfur and displayed a grid-like exhaust vent which, according to Michalak, blasted a hot gas that set his clothes on fire, causing severe burns that later displayed a grid pattern on his torso. Michalak approached the object, noting its seamless construction and overhearing muffled voices from within, though he saw no occupants when he peered inside. After the encounter, Michalak suffered from nausea, headaches, and diarrhea, symptoms consistent with radiation poisoning, though initial tests conducted were inconclusive. He sought medical attention thereafter upon returning to Winnipeg and reported the incident to the authorities. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, along with the Royal Canadian Air Force, then conducted an investigation, which also attracted interest from the American Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization and the United States Air Force under the Condon Committee. Despite Michalak's detailed account and the physical evidence, including the burns on his body and a patch of scorched ground at the site, the authorities couldn't conclusively determine the nature of the encounter. Skeptics suggested that the burns might have been self-inflicted and pointed out inconsistencies in Michalak's story, including his alcohol consumption prior to the incident. StSEL Spaceman. The incident at St. Cyril de Vendover, Quebec, on June 25, 1974, involves a detailed and mysterious encounter with unidentified flying objects and humanoid beings, which remains one of the lesser known but intriguing cases in ufology. Late at night, Mr. L, who had just returned from a vacation, heard a distinct thumping noise outside his mobile home. Upon investigation, he observed a reddish object hovering close to the ground. This object was described as being domed with red and white lights on the top, and its base glowed orange with white, oval-shaped lights encircling it. It cast yellow beams of light onto the ground. As Mr. L went to wake his wife, a buzzing noise heralded the arrival of humanoid entities. The couple saw one creature initially, about 15 feet from their window, and later observed up to 15 of these beings during the event, which lasted 3 hours. The beings were described as 6 feet tall, moving stiffly as if robotic, and not walking but floating above the ground. They also wore no discernible clothing but had bright red bars across their chests, glowing like toaster elements. The beings were also featureless, lacking visible facial characteristics. At one point, they lined up parallel to a nearby creek, holding this formation for over 5 minutes before moving away simultaneously. Interestingly, no clear departure of the UFO or the beings was even noted in the sources available. However, the subsequent investigation yielded fascinating findings. No footprints were left by the entities, consistent with descriptions of them floating. However, tripod-like imprints presumably left by the UFO were then found on the far side of the creek. These imprints had swept the grass down into 3 ring-shaped nests, each 2 feet wide with a diameter of 19 feet. Post-event, the grass in these areas reportedly grew twice as tall as in other areas. Also, investigators found flat pieces of a strange white plastic-like substance at the locations where the humanoid beings were observed. Eagle River Close Encounter. Joseph Monton's encounter with what he claimed was a UFO and its occupants is an interesting story from UFO lore, mainly because of its detailed nature. On the morning of April 18, 1961, in Eagle River, Wisconsin, Simonton, a 60-year-old plumber and amateur geologist, experienced something truly out of the ordinary. According to Simonton, the encounter began while he was at home doing dishes. He was drawn outside by a noise he described as resembling the screech of automobile wheels. Upon investigating, he observed a metallic, saucer-like object descending and hovering just above his yard. The craft, which he described as shiny and silvery, almost like chrome, was about 30 feet in diameter and resembled two inverted bowls or plates, one on top of the other. Simonton reported that a hatch opened on the side of the craft, similar to the trunk of a car, revealing a being about 5 feet tall and appearing somewhat human but swarthy, like an Italian. The entity wore a tight-fitting cap and had a completely hairless face. Simonton noted that the individual seemed to weigh around 120 pounds. This being, along with two others inside the craft, wore uniforms that included one-piece tunics, black with no visible buttons or zippers, and hoods over their heads. One of these beings, which seemed to have higher rank, displayed a white stripe down the leg of his trousers. The beings didn't communicate through spoken language, but rather made gestures. The initial being gestured for water, which Simonton provided by filling a metallic jug he was given. While he was delivering the water, he noticed inside the craft a third entity who seemed to be cooking on a flameless, smoke-emitting grill. Curious, Simonton gestured to indicate food, which prompted the being to offer him 4 small, disc-shaped pancakes. He then accepted these, noting that they were greasy and tasted terribly bland, reminiscent of cardboard. After the exchange, the craft closed its hatch and ascended at a sharp angle, disappearing from sight without leaving any trace but a bent pine tree that returned to its original position and some peculiar pancake-like objects. This encounter left physical evidence in the form of these pancakes, which were later analyzed and found to be made of ordinary earthly materials, mainly buckwheat. However, the story's outlandish details and lack of additional physical evidence have led to a lot of skepticism. Some ufologists theorized that Simonton experienced a genuine encounter with extraterrestrials, perhaps of a benign nature since the interaction was non-hostile and involved an exchange rather than abduction or aggressive act. Skeptics, though, on the other hand, suggest that the encounter could have been a hallucination, a misinterpretation of a more mundane event, or even a fabrication. And the ordinary nature of the pancakes has been pointed out as particularly indicative that the event might not have been as extraordinary as claimed. Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights event is one of the most famous and widely discussed UFO sightings in history. Occurring on the evening of March 13, 1997, it involved the appearance of mysterious lights over the skies of Phoenix, Arizona, and other parts of the state. This event was witnessed by thousands of people, making it one of the most significant mass UFO sightings in modern times. The series of sightings began at about 10:30 p.m. when a man from Henderson, Nevada, noticed a V-shaped object in the sky, which appeared to be moving southeast. This object was described as large and carried multiple lights that formed a distinct pattern. The sightings continued over a span of about 3 hours, covering a geographical range of about 300 miles from the Nevada line through Phoenix and extending to the edge of Tucson. By around 8:15 p.m., the phenomenon had been reported by numerous people in different locations. Witnesses described seeing a large triangle formation of lights that passed silently over their heads. This formation was seen to travel from the northwestern parts of Phoenix to the southeastern regions, moving slowly and deliberately across the sky. The most common description of the formation was that it looked like an immense carpenter square with 5 symmetrical lights, giving the appearance of a solid object. Among the witnesses was a former police officer from Paulden, Arizona, who observed a group of reddish-orange lights in the sky, which he described as forming a geometric pattern. As the lights approached Phoenix, more and more people reported a triangular object that blocked out the stars, implying a solid structure. One of the most notable witnesses was actor Kurt Russell, who reported the lights to air traffic control while he was piloting a plane. As the phenomenon reached Phoenix, the lights were described by some as forming a straight line that seemed to hover and then slowly sink towards the ground or just stay stationary as if the object was preparing to land. This portion of the sighting culminated at about 10 p.m. when the lights appeared to extinguish one by one, leading to speculation that they were flares. The explanations offered for these events are varied. The US Air Force attributed the second set of lights to illumination flares dropped by A-10 Warthog aircraft that were on training exercises at the Barry Goldwater Range. This explanation was intended to account for the stationary lights observed over Phoenix. However, this didn't convincingly explain the large triangular formation observed by multiple witnesses across the state. The military's explanation was met with skepticism, mainly because the behavior of the lights didn't align with the characteristics of typical flare drops, including their duration in the air and the formation they maintained. Also, no sound was associated with the sightings, which is said to be unusual for a military aircraft. The event gained further attention when Arizona Governor Five Singleton, who initially mocked the incident, later admitted that he had witnessed the phenomenon and found it inexplicable. He described it as otherworldly, acknowledging the strangeness of the event and the inadequacy of the official explanations. Jimmy Carter UFO Incident. The Jimmy Carter UFO incident is a really interesting case, primarily because of Carter's higher profile. Before becoming the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter reported witnessing an unidentified flying object while he was in Larry, Georgia in 1969. This incident is particularly significant because it involves a future US president, lending a unique credibility and public interest to the sighting compared to other reports from the general public. Basically, in the evening of 1969, Jimmy Carter was preparing to give a speech at a Lions Club meeting. At around 17 p.m., attention was drawn to the skies by another guest, prompting Carter and about a dozen others to witness what Carter described as a bright white object. It appeared in the west about 30 degrees above the horizon. The object then moved closer, changing colors from white to blue, then to red and back to white, before it receded into the distance and disappeared. The sighting lasted about 10 to 12 minutes. Carter described the object as self-illuminated and distinctly different from any conventional aircraft or known celestial body. This event was significant enough that Carter, influenced by the experience, filed a report with the International UFO Bureau in Oklahoma City in 1973 while he was serving as governor of Georgia. His report detailed the object and its behaviors, noting the changes in color and luminosity, and emphasizing the shared experience among multiple witnesses. In terms of investigations, though, the sighting has been subjected to various interpretations and analysis over the years. Notably, ufologists and skeptics have pointed to Venus as a potential explanation, citing its visibility and brightness around the time of Carter's sighting. However, Carter, who had an interest in astronomy, dismissed Venus as the source, asserting that the object's movements and color changes didn't align with the characteristics of any known celestial body. The hypothesis that Carter might have observed a natural or man-made phenomenon rather than an extraterrestrial spacecraft has also been supported by some investigations. For instance, it was suggested that the object could have been a misidentified planet or a high-altitude barium cloud from a nearby Air Force base used in atmospheric research, which can appear bright and change colors. However, these explanations have not been universally accepted, particularly due to Carter's insistence on the unusual nature of the movement and the structured formation of the lights. The incident had a lasting impact on Carter, influencing his views on UFOs and transparency in government. During his presidential campaign, he promised that if elected, he would ensure that all government UFO information would be disclosed to the public. However, during his presidency, he stepped back from this promise, citing national security concerns and the potential implications for defense. 2009 Norwegian Spiral Anomaly. The 2009 Norwegian Spiral Anomaly is an event that happened over the skies of Norway and Sweden on December 9, 2009. This phenomenon was characterized by a large luminous spiral that emerged from a bright blue beam of light, creating a visible spectacle observed by many across the region. The event lasted for about 10 minutes and concluded with the spiral's gradual dispersion. Initially, the sight of the spiraling light led to a lot of speculation and concern, prompting hundreds of calls to the Norwegian Meteorological Institute as people saw explanations for what they had seen. The visual scale of the anomaly was vast, spanning across northern Norway and Trøndelag, visible even from northern Sweden. The spectacle nature of the display led to a lot of theories about its origins, ranging from natural astronomical phenomenon to more sensational suggestions of extraterrestrial activity. Among the more outlandish theories proposed by UFO enthusiasts were ideas such as the opening of a wormhole or links to high-energy experiments at the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. However, the explanation for the Norwegian spiral anomaly lies in human technological activity rather than extraterrestrial involvement. On December 10, 2009, the Russian Defense Ministry issued a statement acknowledging a failed test of the Bulava missile, which was the actual cause of the observed spiral. According to the statement, the missile's first two stages operated normally, but a technical malfunction occurred at the third stage of its trajectory. This failure resulted in the missile's exhaust being expelled sideways rather than backward, which in turn caused the missile to spin. The spinning motion created the spiral effect seen in the sky. This malfunction of the Bulava missile was not unique to this instance though, as similar visual effects had been noted in the past during other failed missile tests. The spirals and light patterns seen during such events are as a result of the fuel burning in unconventional patterns as the missile loses its intended path and stability. Astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell provided further insights, explaining that the light formation was likely caused when the missile's third stage nozzle was damaged. This damage allowed the exhaust to escape at an angle, pushing the missile into a tumbling motion that produced the spiral effect. Despite the scientific explanation involving the missile test, the event remains a vivid example of how unexplained phenomenon can quickly lead to speculation about extraterrestrial activities. Elizabeth Clower. Elizabeth Clower was a South African woman who gained international fame for her detailed accounts of extraterrestrial contact. Born on July 1, 1910 in Mooi River, Natal, South Africa, she lived a life that mixed with the extraordinary, claiming repeated encounters with alien beings from 1954 to 1963. Her narratives not only delved into personal encounters with extraterrestrials, but also described her travels to another planet. Her first reported extraterrestrial encounter occurred at a young age when she and her sister witnessed a mysterious silver disc in the skies over their family farm. This early experience marked the beginning of a lifelong engagement with unidentified flying objects and alleged beings from another world. Clower was educated at St. Anne's Diocesan College in Pietermaritzburg and furthered her studies in meteorology at Girton College, Cambridge. She also learned to fly a Tiger Moth aircraft, which later contributed to her claims of seeing more UFOs during flight. The most significant and well-documented of her encounters, though, occurred in the mid-1950s, when Clower claimed to have met an extraterrestrial named Akon from the planet Meton, orbiting Proxima Centauri. According to Clower, Akon took her aboard his spacecraft, where she traveled to his home planet. This claim included a detailed description of Meton as a utopian world with advanced technologies that provided for all material needs. Her story took an even more personal turn when she asserted that her relationship with Akon resulted in the birth of a child, who she named Ailing. She claimed that because of different vibrational frequencies of Earth and Meton, she couldn't stay on Akon's planet and had to return home. Her narrative suggested that Ailing remained on Meton to be educated in the advanced sciences of his father's world. Clower documented her experiences in the book Beyond the Light Barrier, which recounts her interstellar travels and her philosophical and technical discussions with Akon. Her accounts go beyond mere contact, proposing a blend of emotional and observational experiences that suggest a deep-seated belief in her experiences or an extraordinary exercise in creative expression. Throughout her life, Clower faced both skepticism and support. While some ufologists and followers embraced her stories as groundbreaking accounts of human extraterrestrial interactions, others criticized them as fabrications lacking empirical evidence. Despite the controversy, though, Clower never wavered in her convictions. She maintained that her experiences were real and that they offered humanity a glimpse of a more advanced and peaceful existence in the cosmos. Ariel Primary School Incident. The Ariel School UFO incident is one of the most well-documented and interesting cases of supposed close encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Basically, it occurred on September 16, 1994 at Ariel School, a private institution near Rua, Zimbabwe. This event stands out because of the number of witnesses, being 62 school children aged between 6 and 12 years, and the detailed consistency of their accounts regarding the appearance of a UFO and its occupants. According to the children and some staff members of the Ariel School, during the mid-morning break, several students noticed 3 silver objects flashing in the sky. These objects eventually descended into a nearby bush area where they landed. Shortly thereafter though, the students witnessed one or more creatures emerging from these objects. The beings were described as small in stature and dressed in tight, shiny black clothing. Most notably, the children report that the creatures had large eyes and that they seemed to communicate with them telepathically, delivering a message that emphasized the importance of taking care of the environment. The incident unfolded quickly though, with the entire encounter lasting about 15 minutes. The children, understandably frightened, ran back to their classrooms and informed their teachers. However, the initial reaction from the school staff was skeptical. The story gained traction when the children returned home and informed their parents, many of whom returned to the school the following day seeking answers. The event was then reported to local authorities and UFO investigators, including Cynthia Hind, Africa's foremost ufologist at the time, who conducted one of the first investigations into the incident. Hind interviewed the children separately, and she asked them to draw pictures of what they had seen. Remarkably, the drawings were consistent in the description of the UFO and beings. The testimonies provided by the children were also strikingly similar, lending a degree of credibility to their accounts that was hard to dismiss. Dr. John Mack, a Harvard University psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize winner, also took an interest in the case. Several months after the incident, Mack traveled to the school and conducted his own interviews with the child witnesses. His approach focused on understanding the psychological impact of the encounter on the children, many of whom were deeply affected by the experience. Also, Mack's involvement brought international attention to the case. Skeptics though have suggested alternative explanations for the incident, including mass hysteria, a misinterpretation of a more mundane event, or even a hoax. However, no definite explanation has fully accounted for all the details reported by the witnesses. Also, the environmental message that was reportedly conveyed by the beings doesn't really align with typical children's fabrications. Exitor Incident. The Exitor Incident, also known as the incident at Exitor, is a well-documented UFO sighting that occurred on September 3, 1965 in Kensington, New Hampshire, close to the town of Exeter. This event is notable for its multiple witnesses, including credible sources like 2 police officers and a teenager, and is considered one of the most significant UFO sightings in history. The main eyewitness, Norman Musellaro, was an 18-year-old heading home to Exeter after visiting his girlfriend in Amesbury, Massachusetts. It was around 2 a.m. when Musellaro, while hiking on New Hampshire Route 150, observed unusual bright red lights in the sky near Kensington. These lights were not only intensely bright, but also appeared to hover above the ground, illuminating the area and nearby houses. Musellaro initially thought that they might be emergency vehicle lights, but as he approached, it became clear that the lights were from an unidentified flying object. Startled by the object's silent hovering and sudden movements towards him, Musellaro dove into a ditch to hide. He reported that the object then hovered over a nearby farmhouse before rapidly moving away. In a state of panic, he managed to stop a passing car and convinced the couple inside to drive him to the Exeter police station. At the police station, Officer Reginald Tolland took Musellaro's report. Musellaro was visibly shaken, lending credibility to his account. Tolland then contacted Officer Eugene Bertrand, who earlier that evening had encountered a woman reporting a similar experience, being a large object with flashing red lights had followed her car. Bertrand, alongside Musellaro, returned to the sighting location. There, they too encountered the object, described as large, dark, and silent with pulsating red lights. The sighting was also confirmed by third officer David Hunt, who arrived later and also observed the object. Following this incident, the local community reported numerous sightings. Exeter's police chief contacted Pease Air Force Base, leading to an investigation by the Air Force. Other residents, including high school students and additional police officers, reported seeing similar objects in the area around the same time. The Air Force initially dismissed the sightings as misidentifications of natural phenomena like stars and planets exacerbated by temperature inversions. However, Project Blue Book, the US Air Force's UFO investigation body, later investigated but didn't conclusively determine the nature of the sightings, noting the credibility of the police officers involved. Skeptical investigations years later proposed that the sightings might have been misinterpretations of aerial refueling operations or aircraft lights, particularly from KC-97 tankers known to operate in the area, which had distinctive lighting patterns and could appear unusually shaped from certain angles. Inured Cold. Inured Cold, also known as the Smiling Man, is a purported alien figure associated with UFO sightings and is considered a humanoid entity. The name Inured Cold became prominent following the encounters reported in the 1960s, particularly linked with other unusual phenomena in the area like the Mothman sightings in West Virginia. Inured Cold is often described as a humanoid male figure, unusually tall, lacking discernible ears, nose, or hair, and often dressed in a reflective metallic suit. Witnesses have described his complexion as dark and his eyes small and beady, set far apart. He's most notably characterized by his unnerving and constant grin, which earned him the nickname the Grinning Man. According to some accounts, Inured Cold claimed to be from a planet named Lanulos, situated in the Ganymedes galaxy, and he allegedly communicated telepathically. The first documented sighting of Inured Cold occurred on October 16, 1966, by two boys, Martin Mouse Munov and James Jimmy Yanchidis, in New Jersey. They encountered a strange, grinning man standing near a fence as they walked home. This figure, dressed in a green metallic suit, reportedly chased them, but they managed to escape. The most detailed encounter with Inured Cold took place on November 2, 1966. Woodrow Durenbinger, a resident of Parkersburg, West Virginia, reported that while driving home on Interstate 77, he encountered a strange craft that forced him to stop. A man then emerged from the vehicle, introducing himself as Inured Cold. Durenbinger described Cold's vehicle as resembling an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends. This encounter became highly publicized and was the subject of extensive interviews and a book. And the appearance of Inured Cold coincides temporally and geographically with the sightings of the Mothman, another cryptid, leading to possible speculation about a connection between these phenomena. The area around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where these sightings occurred, experienced a variety of paranormal activities during this time, including poltergeist phenomenon and UFO sightings, which further complicates the understanding of Inured Cold's nature and origins. Explanations for Inured Cold varied widely. Some believe he may be an extraterrestrial because of his association with UFO activity and advanced technology. Others speculate that he could be linked to the Men in Black, given his appearance and mysterious demeanor. Skeptical interpretations, though, suggest he might have been a figment of collective imagination fueled by the UFO craze of the 1960s or a misinterpretation of military experiments or aircraft. Broadhaven School UFO Incident. The Broadhaven UFO incident, often referred to as the Broadhaven Triangle, remains one of the UK's most interesting and extensively documented series of UFO sightings, concentrated around the small Welsh village of Broadhaven in 1977. This period not only marked a high point in global interest in UFOs and extraterrestrial life, partly fueled by popular culture phenomenon like Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but also by the Cold War atmosphere that permeated global consciousness. The incident, though, that put Broadhaven into UFO spotlight involved 16 school children and their teacher at Broadhaven Primary School. These children reported seeing a UFO described as cigar-shaped with a dome and emitting colorful lights during their lunch break. Their teacher, initially skeptical, asked the children to draw what they had seen. Remarkably, the drawing showed striking similarities, depicting the object with consistent features, despite the children being isolated from each other while drawing. Following the school setting, the village of Broadhaven and its surroundings became a hotbed for UFO sightings. Multiple residents reported encounters with unusual aircraft and even alien beings. Among the notable encounters was that of hotel owner Rose Granville, who reported seeing a spacecraft and figures in silver suits near her property. Her account included physical traces purportedly left by the craft, like scorch marks on the ground. David Davies, one of the school children, provided a particularly compelling account. Years later, he recalled the clarity of his sighting, describing the object in detail and the profound impact the experience had on his life. According to Davies, the UFO was unmistakably not of human origin, a sentiment echoed by other witnesses who reported their encounters around the same time. The local police received multiple calls during this period, documenting various sightings of credible witnesses, including other children and adults who were unconnected to the initial school incident. These accounts added legitimacy to the claims and prompted further media and scientific interest. The UK's Ministry of Defense even monitored the situation, evidenced by documents released decades later. However, the official stance remained skeptical, attributing the sightings to misidentifications of military aircraft or a natural phenomenon. This explanation was met with skepticism from the witnesses and the public, many of whom were dissatisfied with the dismissive official responses. Billy Meyer's encounter. Billy Meyer, a Swiss individual, gained international attention in the 1970s for his claims of regular contact with extraterrestrial beings from the Pleiades star cluster, which he said began when he was just 5 years old in 1942. Meyer's interactions with these beings reportedly continued throughout his life, culminating in a series of photographs he took in the spring of 1976, which he claimed were physical evidence of these encounters. These photographs were later published in a 1979 book by Wendell C. Stevens, a former United States Air Force pilot who became one of Meyer's most vocal supporters. The photographs depicted what appeared to be metallic objects, described as flying saucers hovering over the Swiss landscape. Despite the poor quality of the images though, which often showed the UFOs as blurry metallic blobs against the mountainous background of Switzerland, Stevens asserted that the photographs had not been tampered with or doctored in any way. This claim, however, has been met with skepticism from other UFO researchers and the general public, many of whom questioned the authenticity of the images and Meyer's claims. The photographs eventually found a place in pop culture, most notably being used in the background of the iconic I Want to Believe UFO poster that featured prominently in the office of FBI Special Agent Fox Mulder, portrayed by David Duchovny in the US science fiction television series The X-Files. This inclusion helped to cement the images in the public consciousness as a symbol of the UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrial speculation. Despite the controversy surrounding their authenticity though, Meyer's UFO photographs continue to be of interest, not only to those who study UFOs and extraterrestrial life, but also to collectors of memorabilia associated with ufology. In recognition of their iconic status and ongoing public fascination, these images were included in a Sotheby's auction in the United States' dedication to space photography. The Levelland UFO case. The Levelland UFO case unfolded over the course of a single night from November 2nd to November 3rd, 1957, around the small town of Levelland, Texas, which had a population of about 10,000 people at the time. This case is notable within the field of ufology because of the large number of credible witnesses who reported their encounters within a brief period. Despite this, explanations from both the US Air Force and UFO skeptics attribute the phenomenon to natural causes, like ball lightning or a severe electrical storm. The first report came from Pedro Salcedo and Joey Salas, who were driving when they encountered a blue flash of light near the road. Their truck's engines had stopped, and a rocket-shaped object allegedly arose and approached the truck, causing Salcedo to jump out and hide. The object then passed over, producing a great sound and a rush of wind, and generating a lot of heat. Once the object departed, the vehicle functioned normally. Shortly after this, at around 10:55 p.m., a married couple driving in the area reported that their vehicle's headlights and radio died for several seconds as they witnessed a bright flash of light moving across the sky. 5 minutes later, Jose Alvarez encountered a similar phenomenon, with his vehicle stalling near a strange object on the road. His vehicle then resumed normal function after the object had departed. At about 12:05 a.m. on November 3rd, Texas Tech student Noel Wright experienced vehicle malfunctions as he approached an egg-shaped object about 100 feet long on the road. The object eventually took off and his vehicle returned to normal operation. Another witness, Frank Williams, reported encountering a brightly glowing object on the road that caused his car to stop, and the object flew away shortly thereafter, restoring his vehicle's function. Throughout the night, the Levelland police, led by Officer A.G. Fowler, received 15 separate reports of similar incidents. Multiple police officers, including Sheriff Wade Clem and Fire Chief Ray Jones, personally witnessed unusual aerial phenomenon which corresponded with electrical disturbances in their vehicles. The multitude of reports prompted an investigation by the US Air Force under Project Blue Book. However, the official explanation attributed the sightings to electrical phenomenon like ball lightning, exacerbated by stormy weather conditions that night. This conclusion was supported by Donald H. Menzel, a noted UFO skeptic, who suggested that the conditions were ideal for such natural occurrences. Contradicting the official explanation, ufologists like James E. McDonald and J. Allen Hynek point out the absence of a thunderstorm or significant lightning activity at the time of the sightings, arguing against the ball lightning theory. They criticized the Air Force's investigation for being too brief and not thoroughly considering all eyewitness accounts. McDonald in particular testified before the U.S. House of Representatives in 1968, emphasizing the unlikelihood of the official explanation. Mantis aliens. Mantis aliens, often cited in alien abduction scenarios, are described as tall with elongated torsos and limbs, and insectoid features including large slanted eyes. Their presence in mythology spans various cultures, including Native American and African traditions, where they're often revered or feared based on their otherworldly attributes. The origin of mantids, though, is widely speculated upon. Some theories suggest that they might come from the Draco system and potentially collaborate with other alien species like the reptilians. Their physical characteristics are notable for their resemblance to the praying mantis, an earthly insect which includes a segmented exoskeleton and a height that can reach up to 7 feet. Reports also describe them as having additional joints in their limbs and a triangular head. Communication with humans is primarily reported as telepathic, although they're also said to emit clicking sounds when communicating among themselves. Regarding their abilities, some abductees claim mantids can shapeshift or create illusions to mask their true form, often appearing human to blend into society. Abduction appearances involving mantids frequently describe them as playing a supervisory role, overseeing the activities of other beings like the small greys, who are often depicted as their subordinates. The intent behind these abductions appears to be part of a broader agenda, with some abductees feeling that mantids have benevolent intentions towards humanity, aiming to aid in their spiritual development and manage ecological preservation. Conversely, other reports suggest a more sinister motive, proposing that mantids are involved in complex hybridization programs or are preparing for large-scale interventions on Earth. The impact of these encounters on individuals varies though, with some reporting enhanced psychic abilities and a newfound sense of cosmic stewardship, while others endure ongoing trauma and fear from their experiences. Donald Trump alien attack. The Donald Trump alien attack, also known as the Cisco Grove encounter, unfolded on September 4, 1964. It began during a routine hunting trip in Cisco Grove, Placer County, California. Donald Trump, a 28-year-old bow and arrow hunter, found himself separated from his friends and decided to spend the night in a tree for safety as the night approached. His ordeal started when he noticed a white light zigzagging through the trees at a low altitude, which he initially mistook for a helicopter. Hoping to signal what he thought might be a search party, Shrum descended and began lighting flares. The light, however, did not belong to a helicopter but to an unidentified flying object, which stopped about 50 yards from its location. Realizing the object was something unfamiliar, Shrum quickly climbed back to his tree for safety. Shortly after, he encountered 3 beings approaching his location. 2 of these appeared humanoid, and 1 resembled a robot. This encounter escalated as the beings attempted to dislodge him from the tree by shaking it vigorously. Shrum described how the robotic-like entity emitted a white vapor that rendered him unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, Shrum attempted to defend himself by throwing lighted matches at the beings, which temporarily deterred them. He also used his bow to fire arrows at the attackers, noting that hitting the robot caused sparks to fly, confirming its metallic nature. Despite its efforts, a second robot appeared and incapacitated him again with the vapor. Throughout the night, the assault continued with the beings repeatedly trying to climb the tree. Shrum resisted by throwing various objects and shaking the tree. As dawn approached, additional beings arrived, and a large volume of smoke finally caused him to lose consciousness completely. When he woke at dawn, barely hanging from the tree by his belt, the beings had disappeared. He was eventually rescued and reunited with his fellow hunters. One of the other hunters, also separated from the group, corroborated seeing the UFO, although he didn't witness the beings. Lonnie Zamora Incident. The Lonnie Zamora incident is a well-documented UFO sighting that took place on April 24, 1964 in Socorro, New Mexico. This incident is notable because of the credibility of the witness, Lonnie Zamora, a police officer, and the detailed observations he provided. The sighting also received a lot of attention from both the media and UFO researchers and remains one of the cases that the US Air Force's Project Blue Book could not conclusively debunk or attribute to a conventional explanation. On the day of the incident at about 5:45 p.m., Zamora was in pursuit of a speeding vehicle when he was distracted by a loud roar and a flame in the sky. Believing that a nearby dynamite shack might have exploded, he broke off the chase to investigate. As he approached the area, he spotted an object that he initially thought was an overturned white car. However, upon closer inspection, Zamora realized that the object was oval-shaped and unfamiliar, featuring a shiny metallic-like surface. Zamora then observed two small beings in white coveralls near the object. Startled by the noise of the roar and seeing the flame under the object as it began to lift off the ground, Zamora took cover and observed the object descend with a great roar before it rapidly accelerated away from the scene. The physical evidence observed at the site included burnt bushes and scorched earth, lending further weight to Zamora's testimony. Following the sighting, investigations were conducted by several organizations, including the US Air Force's Project Blue Book. Although various theories were proposed, from experimental military vehicles to pranks, none satisfactorily explained all aspects of the incident. The Air Force ultimately categorized the Zamora sighting as unknown, a rare classification indicating that the case lacked sufficient data for a conventional explanation. Washington National Airport sighting. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO sighting, also known as the Washington Flap, involved a series of unidentified flying object sightings reported from July 12 to 29, 1952 over Washington, D.C. This event is particularly significant because of its duration and the number of witnesses involved, including air traffic controllers, radar operators, and military pilots. The most notable sightings occurred on consecutive weekends, July 19th to 20th and July 26th to 27th. During these periods, multiple air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport observed strange radar returns accompanied by visual sightings of bright lights in the sky. The objects displayed highly unusual flight patterns and rapid velocities that were not characteristic of any known aircraft at the time. On the night of July 19th, Edward Nugent, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, first noticed 7 objects on his radar that appeared to be moving erratically near the city. These objects didn't conform to any known flight paths and were not associated with any scheduled aircraft. The radar blips suggested movements that were sudden and not typical of conventional aircraft, with speeds estimated to be much higher than any aircraft at the time could achieve. Shortly after Nugent's sighting, his supervisor, Harry Barnes, and other air traffic control personnel observed the objects both on radar and visually. They reported seeing bright lights maneuvering in the sky above Washington, D.C. Andrews Air Force Base, located just a few miles away, also tracked the objects on their radar, and military personnel reported seeing a bright light moving at incredible speeds. As the sightings continued, the Air Force sent fighter jets to intercept the objects. Pilots reported seeing bright lights that would either disappear or outrun the jets when they attempted to approach. However, no contact or communication was made with the objects. The incidents then received significant media attention, leading to public concern and widespread speculation about their nature and origin. In response to these events, the US Air Force conducted investigations under Project Blue Book. Air Force officials initially suggested that the sightings could be attributed to temperature inversions, which can cause radar signals to bend and reflect off distant objects such as ground lights, making them appear as airborne objects. This explanation, however, was not satisfactory to all, as it didn't account for the visual sightings and expert witness testimonies from trained observers like pilots and radar operators. Charles Jevington. Charles Jevington, a 74-year-old resident of Thursby, Cumbria, famously disappeared in May 1955 under mysterious circumstances, only to reappear 5 days later with an extraordinary story. His case has interested both locals and researchers because of the mysterious details surrounding his initial disappearance and subsequent return. In 1955, Jevington was last seen by Meg Compton, a local farmer's daughter, as he hurried across a field towards a woodland carrying only a simple backpack. This sighting was the beginning of his mysterious journey. When Jevington vanished, a thorough police investigation was launched. Despite extensive searches and inquiries, including efforts by both the local police and the West Yorkshire Constabulary, no conclusive evidence was found regarding his whereabouts or what might have happened to him. The lack of any trace led to widespread speculation and concern within the community. Jevington resurfaced in Thursday in August 1960, reappearing as abruptly as he had vanished. His explanation for his absence was as bewildering as his disappearance, being that he claimed to have been traveling through space aboard a flying saucer, visiting various extraterrestrial worlds. According to Jevington, after encountering a spacecraft in the woods, he was invited by its extraterrestrial occupants to join them on their journey. He even claimed to have returned briefly to collect some personal belongings before departing Earth. Jevington described the planets as he visited as both weird and wonderful. His story was met with skepticism though, mainly from a local astronomer who attended his recounting. This astronomer mockingly questioned the validity of Jevington's claims, provoking a detailed response from Jevington about the physical characteristics of outer planets, specifically the ring systems, which were not widely recognized or accepted by the scientific community at the time. His assertions about the ring systems of gas giants, which were later confirmed by space missions, added a layer of complexity and some credibility to his tale, despite remaining largely unbelievable to many. The skepticism and ridicule that Jevington faced upon revealing his experiences led him to decide to leave Thursday permanently. True to his word, he disappeared once again a few weeks later under similarly mysterious circumstances and has not been seen since. Southern Television Broadcast Intrusion. On November 26, 1977, a mysterious broadcast interruption occurred during a news report on the Southern Television Network in the UK, affecting visitors in parts of southern England. The audio portion of the television broadcast was overtaken by a strange, distorted voice claiming to be from the Ashtar Galactic Command. This voice delivered a message for about 6 minutes, warning of the dangers of humanity's current path and urging disarmament and peace. The voice, which introduced itself as Virlon, implored humanity to destroy its weapons and cautioned about evil forces that could mislead people. It emphasized a message of peace and spiritual evolution, tying into New Age philosophies by referencing the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, a time purportedly marked by peace and spiritual growth. Technically, the broadcast intrusion was facilitated by a vulnerability in the Huntington transmitter of the Independent Broadcasting Authority, which rebroadcasts a signal received from another transmitter rather than through a direct landline feed. This setup allowed an unauthorized signal transmitted from a nearby location with relatively low power to override the intended broadcast signal. Despite investigations, no one was ever officially identified or held responsible for the incident, leading to a mix of conclusions. Some believe it was a sophisticated hoax requiring considerable technical skills, while others speculated about extraterrestrial involvement. Kecksburg UFO Incident. The Kecksburg UFO incident, which occurred on December 9, 1965 in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, is one of the most debated and mysterious events in ufology. This incident involved a large fireball seen by citizens across 6 US states and Canada, which caused a lot of reports of a significant unidentified flying object crashing into the woods near Kecksburg. What followed was a swift military response that has fueled decades of speculation and conspiracy theories regarding what actually landed there. According to initial reports, witnesses described the object as a large, brilliant fireball that streaked across the sky before crashing into the woods near Kecksburg. The object was said to have made a significant thump upon landing, and some reports included observations of blue smoke and vibrations. The local newspaper quickly then responded, and the area where the object landed was cordoned off by the US Army and state police, anticipating a thorough investigation of the site. Witnesses and local authorities reported a large object, acorn-shaped and about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, with inscriptions that resembled hieroglyphics. This description has led to various theories, including the possibility of it being an alien spacecraft, a secret military project, or even a Soviet satellite, as was later suggested by NASA. The initial military and police response, including the area's immediate cordoning off and the subsequent arrival of military personnel, caused some allegations of a cover-up. Years later, NASA disclosed that fragments examined from the area were likely from a Soviet satellite, but unfortunately, the records detailing these findings were reportedly lost in 1987. This explanation, though, did little to quell the public and scientific curiosity about the incident, partly because the lost records spurred further skepticism about the transparency of the investigation. Further complicating the narrative was that there was investigations into the trajectory and impact of the supposed fireball, suggesting that it descended at a steep angle, making it likely that it was a meteorite or space debris. However, the physical descriptions of the object from eyewitnesses didn't entirely match that of typical meteorite remnants. In response to a lawsuit filed under the Freedom of Information Act, NASA agreed in 2007 to search for the lost records pertaining to the incident, although this effort reportedly did not yield any significant new information. Skeptics and researchers have proposed various explanations for the discrepancies in the official accounts, including the possibility of misidentification, military activity involving the retrieval of satellite debris, or even experimental aircraft. Valentich disappearance. The disappearance of Frederick Valentich is one of the most interesting unresolved cases of aviation and UFO lore. Basically, on the evening of October 21st, 1978, Valentich, a 20-year-old Australian pilot, vanished over Bass Strait while piloting a Cessna 182-liter light aircraft registered VHDSJ during a 125 nautical mile training flight from Moorabbin Airport in Victoria, Australia to King Island. The case became particularly famous because of Valentich's last communication with Melbourne Air Traffic Control, in which he reported encountering an unidentified aircraft following him at an altitude about 1,000 feet above his own. His descriptions during this communication were pretty unsettling, being that he reported that the mysterious object was large and illuminated by 4 bright lights, and that he was unable to identify its make or type. And Valentich also reported that his engine was running rough, and his final words were that it's not an aircraft, followed by a metallic, scraping sound before the transmission had ceased. The disappearance sparked a significant search effort thereafter and rescue operation that included both air and sea assets covering 1,000 square miles of the Bass Strait. Despite extensive efforts though, neither Valentich nor any debris from his aircraft was ever found. The official investigation by the Australian Department of Transport was unable to conclusively determine the cause of the disappearance and eventually declared it presumed fatal for Valentich. The case has fueled widespread interest and multiple theories over the years, ranging from alien abduction or more terrestrial explanations like spatial disorientation leading to a crash into the sea. Some theorize that he, while disoriented, might have been flying upside down and saw his own aircraft lights reflected in the water, or maybe even lights from a nearby island. And further deepening the mystery, a Cessna 182-liter aircraft's cowl flap was actually discovered in 1983, washed ashore on Flinders Island, within the vicinity of the presumed crash site. Analysis by the Royal Australian Navy suggested that it could have feasibly originated from Valentich's aircraft, which offers a tangible clue that his plane did indeed crash. Japan Airlines Cargo Flight 1628 Incident. The Japan Airlines Cargo Flight 1628 incident is one of the most documented and analyzed UFO encounters in aviation history. Basically, on November 17, 1986, a Japanese Boeing 747-200F cargo aircraft piloted by Captain Kenji Terauchi was en route from Paris to Narita International Airport near Tokyo when he encountered unidentified flying objects over eastern Alaska. This encounter gained a lot of attention because of the pilot's detailed report and involvement in various aviation and government bodies, including the Federal Aviation Administration, in the investigation. The incident occurred during the Reykjavik to Angkor section of the flight. At about 1711, while flying at an altitude of 35,000 feet, Captain Terauchi noticed 2 smaller craft and what he described as a much larger mothership. These objects, according to him, were flying parallel to his aircraft and then moved to positions above it. The pilot described the objects as having a shiny metallic surface with a green light. The The encounter lasted just for several minutes, during which Terauchi attempted various maneuvers, including a full circle to shake off the objects. Despite these efforts though, he reported that the objects remained within the aircraft. Initially, the captain contacted the FAA in Anchorage to report the sighting. The FAA's radar operations confirmed that while they could see the Japan Airlines flight on their radar, they didn't detect any other objects in the vicinity. This was supported by reports from two nearby aircraft, being a United Airlines flight and an Air Force C-130, which neither could confirm the presence of the unidentified objects either visually or on radar. Following the incident, extensive investigations were conducted. The FAA initially took the pilot's report very seriously, considering his professional background and the detailed nature of his observations. However, after examining the radar tapes and conducting further interviews, no conclusive evidence of any other aircraft in the area could be found. Astronomers and aviation experts, including Philip J. Klass, suggested that the lights observed by Terauchi were likely planets like Jupiter and Mars, which were particularly bright at the time and could have been mistaken for aircraft lights because of their intensity and position in the sky. The scientific explanation posited that what Terauchi witnessed could have been an optical illusion caused by the planet Jupiter, which was in conjunction with Mars and Mercury, and might have created a scenario in which the planets could be misconstructed as moving objects because of the relative motion of the aircraft and the planet's brightness. Skeptic and aviation writer Brian Dunning suggested that the incident, while compelling, was not extraordinary beyond a misidentification of astronomical objects. Despite the logical explanations provided by experts though, the incident continues to be a topic of interest in both aviation and UFO circles. Captain Terauchi maintained his assertion that what he saw was not of this world, and his detailed descriptions have fueled ongoing speculation and debate regarding the nature of the objects he saw that day. Jan Wolski. The Emelson abduction is an alleged alien abduction case from Poland, centering on the experiences of Jan Wolski, a farmer from Emelson village. Basically, on May 10, 1978, Wolski reported an encounter with the extraterrestrial beings and their craft, which has since become a significant case within UFO studies in Poland. On the morning of May 10, 1978, Jan Wolski, who was then 70 years old, was driving his horse-drawn cart near Emelson when he encountered two small humanoid beings with greenish faces and pointed features. These beings, described as being about 5 feet tall, jumped onto Wolski's cart. Communicating in an unknown language, they directed him to a location where Wolski observed a large, white hovering object, which he described as being the size of a bus and about 14.75 to 16.5 feet in height. Wolski was led inside the craft then via an elevator-like platform. Inside, he described seeing more beings similar to the ones he met earlier. He reported that the interior of the craft was really dark, with the exception of the light coming through the doorway. Wolski recounted being examined by the entities using a device resembling two saucers. After the examination, he was allowed to dress and leave the craft. The landing site of the supposed craft was also visited by locals shortly after Wolski returned home. Observers noted that the grass was flattened and dew-covered, suggesting physical disturbances consistent with a heavy object having rested there. Also, there were reports of footprints that were neither human nor animal in origin. But the Emelson incident did not gain immediate widespread attention, but has since become subject to periodic revisits by UFO researchers and media. In 2005, a memorial was erected at the site of the alleged encounter, commemorating Wolski's story and marking Emelson as a point of interest for those fascinated by UFO phenomena. Skeptics, though, have proposed several conventional explanations for Wolski's account, ranging from hallucinations to the misinterpretation of natural phenomena. The lack of physical evidence beyond altered vegetation and unverified footprints makes it challenging to validate the claim scientifically. Lubbock Lights. The Lubbock Lights incident, which occurred in 1951 over the city of Lubbock, Texas, is one of the most documented and debated UFO sightings in American history. This event involved multiple sightings of unusual formations of lights in the night sky, reported primarily by credible witnesses, being 3 college professors from Texas Technological College, which is now Texas Tech University, and later corroborated by other residents and a student photographer who captured images of the phenomenon. Basically, on the evening of August 25th, 1951, around 9 p.m., professors A.G. Olberg, W.L. Ducker, and W.I. Robinson were sitting in the backyard of one of their homes when they observed a formation of 20 to 30 lights pass overhead. These lights, described as being as bright as stars but larger, moved across the sky at a really high speed. The professors, experienced in scientific observation, immediately ruled out meteors and aircraft as the source because of the speed and pattern of the movement. And shortly after the initial sighting, a similar pattern of lights was observed again, reinforcing the unusual nature of the phenomenon. The incident gained further credibility when, on September 5, 1951, the same group of professors, along with 2 other colleagues, witnessed a similar event. Carl Hart, Jr., a freshman at Texas Tech, managed to capture photographs of the lights on the evening of August 30, 1951. Observing a formation of 18 to 20 white lights in a V shape, Hart quickly retrieved a 35mm camera and snapped several photographs of the lights as they moved overhead. These photographs were later published by a local newspaper and distributed nationally, including in Life magazine. The U.S. Air Force, under Project Blue Book, then investigated the Lubbock lights. Edward J. Ruppelt, the supervisor of Project Blue Book, personally traveled to Lubbock to interview witnesses and assess the evidence. Initially, the Air Force suggested that a type of bird, possibly plovers, reflecting the city's new streetlights, might explain the sightings. However, this explanation was met with a lot of skepticism, particularly from the original witnesses, who were confident that the objects they saw were not birds. Ruppelt's investigation included analysis of the Hart photographs, which the Air Force concluded were not hoaxed but also not definitive proof of extraterrestrial spacecraft. The professors who witnessed the lights maintained that the objects they observed differed from the formations shown in Hart's photos. 4chan Gray Alien Photo. The 4chan Gray Alien photo refers to an image posted anonymously on the 4chan message board on November 21st, 2018 in the paranormal section. The poster basically claimed to have taken the photo from inside a car while working on it late at night. After hearing a bang, which they initially thought was a raccoon, they took a picture that appeared to show an alien being standing about 8 feet tall. The entity quickly disappeared after the photo was taken, it said. Subsequent discussion and investigation by users on the platform, though, led to the conclusion that the image was a hoax. The alien in the picture resembled typical gray aliens, but was distinguished by visible pupils and irises, and was taller than usual descriptions of gray aliens. The post generated a lot of attention and debate both on 4chan and other social media platforms like Reddit, but it was ultimately deemed a hoax. Mantell UFO Incident. The Mantell UFO incident, one of the earliest and most publicized cases involving a purported UFO sighting, occurred on January 7, 1948, near Franklin, Kentucky. This event resulted in the tragic death of 25-year-old Captain Thomas F. Mantell, a pilot in the Kentucky Air National Guard, who crashed his P-51 Mustang fighter plane during his pursuit of the unidentified object. On the day of the incident, personnel at Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox, Kentucky, were alerted by the Kentucky Highway Patrol about a mysterious object in the sky near Madisonville. Responding to the report, Captain Mantell, flying with the 165th Fighter Squadron, was ordered to approach and identify the object. Mantell, along with the squadron, pursued the UFO. However, his comrades discontinued their chase due to a lack of oxygen equipment, which was necessary for high-altitude flight. Mantell, determined to identify the object, continued the pursuit alone. As Mantell ascended beyond 25,000 feet without proper oxygen equipment, he reportedly blacked out, leading to his aircraft spiraling out of control and crashing on a farm near the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the plane in a circling descent before it crashed. Mantell's watch stopped at the time of the crash, and he was found dead among the wreckage, which sparked a lot of rumors and speculative reports regarding the nature of the object he was chasing. Initially, some speculated that Mantell might have been chasing Venus, but this theory was dismissed due to the atmospheric conditions that would have obscured the planet. In 1952, Project Blue Book considered that the object Mantell encountered was likely a skyhook balloon, a then classified high-altitude balloon used for espionage purposes, unknown to Mantell and the public at the time. The speculation around the incident included a lot of claims like extraterrestrial engagement and even suggestions that Mantle's aircraft had been shot down by hostile force. None of these claims, though, were substantiated by evidence. Detailed examinations refuted the idea of radioactive wreckage or bullet holes in the plane, and no concrete evidence supported any engagement with extraterrestrial entities. Utsurobun. The Utsurobun incident, recorded in 1803 in Japan, is an interesting example of historical extraterrestrial encounter legends. The term Utsurobun refers to a hollow boat, a descriptor derived from the mysterious vessel structure as detailed in various Japanese texts. The incident was first documented in the Oshokozaki around 1815 and further elaborated in 3 other texts over the next few decades. On February 22, 1803, fishermen from the eastern coast of Japan's Hitachi province discovered an unusual vessel adrift at sea. They described the craft as about 3.3 meters high and 5.45 meters wide, resembling a traditional Japanese incense burner in shape, with its upper part crafted from red lacquered rosewood and the lower part reinforced with metal plates. The boat's design included several glass or crystal windows, barred and sealed with tree resin. Inside, the fishermen found strange symbols similar to modern-day South Korean flags and a variety of items including bed sheets, a bottle of water, and food. The interior also contained text in an unknown language. A key element of the encounter was a young woman, estimated to be between 18 and 20 years old, discovered inside the vessel. She had distinctive red hair augmented with white extensions, a style unrecorded in any existing literature, and wore clothes made of unknown fabrics. The woman spoke in an unrecognizable language and carried a square box that she guarded closely, refusing to let anyone touch it. Local villagers then speculated about the woman's origins, suggesting she might have been a foreign princess exiled due to a scandal. The theory was that the box could contain something significant from her past, possibly the severed head of a deceased lover, reflecting a practice of casting out such boats as part of a tradition. Despite attempts to communicate with her, though, the language barrier proved insurmountable. Eventually, respecting what they believed to be her destiny, the villagers set the vessel back to sea, allowing it to drift away with her aboard. Over the years, the tale of the Utsurobun has been analyzed and debated by historians, ethnologists, and ufologists. Some suggest the story could be a symbolic representation of Japan's cultural isolation during the Edo period, infused with details that express both fascination and apprehension about foreign influences. Others, considering the detailed descriptions of the vessel and the woman, suggest that there's a possibility of an early documented encounter with extraterrestrial visitors. Villa Santina Encounter. The Villa Santina encounter occurred on August 14, 1947, near the Cesaro Creek in Villa Santina, Italy. On this day, an artist was outside painting the environment when he suddenly observed a disc-shaped object, about 30 feet in diameter, landing nearby. The incident unfolded rapidly as 2 unusual beings emerged from the craft. The beings, described by the artist, stood at about 3 feet tall. They were dressed in dark blue coveralls with distinctive bright red collars and belts. On their heads, they wore spherical helmets that seemed to emphasize their already larger than average heads. However, their faces were visible through the helmets. The skin of these beings was said to be greenish, and their eyes were large, plum-colored with a vertical pupil, lacking both eyelashes and eyebrows. Their noses were straight and relatively large, and their hands resembled claws, greenish in color and possessing 8 fingers each. The fingers were arranged with 4 opposing the other, similar to how human thumbs oppose the fingers. The artist's interaction with these beings took a startling turn though when he attempted to greet them, still holding his paintbrushes. This gesture might have been misinterpreted as hostile, since one of the beings touched its belt and emitted a thin vapor that rendered the artist dazed and caused him to fall into his back. While he was incapacitated, the beings approached and examined his easel, which they then picked up, showing that it was taller than both of them. Despite his weakened state though, the artist managed to observe the beings as they returned to their craft. He noted that they seemed to be panting heavily, which could suggest they were not accustomed to Earth's atmospheric conditions. Shortly after, they re-entered their disc-shaped object, which then took off from the ground, hovered momentarily, and then disappeared. This encounter was later documented in various sources, including the May 1964 edition of Silipius, which is a publication by the Centro Studi Keplerology of Turin, and in the book El Gran Enigma de los Platillos Volantes by Antonio Ribera. These documents provide a basis for further study and discussion among those interested in the field of ufology. Antonio Vilas-Boas abduction. Antonio Vilas-Boas, a Brazilian farmer who later became a lawyer, reported one of the earliest and most detailed cases of alien abduction on October 16, 1957. At the time, he was just 23 years old, working on his farm near São Francisco de Sales in Brazil. The event began late at night when he was plowing his fields to avoid the daytime heat. He then noticed what he initially thought was a red star in the sky. This object descended toward him, growing larger and revealing itself as a circular or egg-shaped craft with a red light at the front and a rotating structure on top. As it landed on 3 legs, he attempted to escape on his tractor, but the vehicle's engine and lights abruptly failed, forcing him to flee on foot. Shortly thereafter, he was apprehended by a humanoid figure about 5 feet tall, wearing gray coveralls and a helmet. This being's eyes were said to be small and blue, and it communicated with sounds resembling barks or yelps. 3 similar entities then joined the first, helping to subdue him and bring him aboard their craft. Inside the spacecraft, it's reported that he was stripped of his clothing and smeared with a gel-like substance. He was then led to a large semicircular room covered with strange red symbols, which he later replicated for researchers. In this room, he underwent a blood extraction from his chin. Subsequently, he was left alone in a room where gas was released, causing him a lot of discomfort and illness. The encounters took a more personal turn though when a humanoid female who was about 5 feet tall but appeared attractive to him entered the room. She had long white hair and red body hair, large blue cow-like eyes, and a small pointed chin. It's said that he and this female then engaged in sexual intercourse, after which the female gestured to her belly and then upwards, which he interpreted as indicating that she intended to raise their offspring in space. This aspect of the encounter suggests a possible interest in human genetics or reproduction by the beings. After the encounter, he was given a tour of the craft, during which he tried to take an object resembling a clock as evidence, but was prevented from doing so by the beings. He was then released and observed the spacecraft departing. Upon returning home, he discovered that 4 hours had elapsed since his abduction. Following this incident, he suffered from a variety of symptoms consistent with radiation exposure such as nausea, lesions, and general malaise. He sought medical help, and his story was then investigated by Jose Martins and Dr. Olavo Fontes, the latter of whom concluded that Vilas-Boas had been exposed to a lot of radiation. Despite skepticism and alternative explanations suggesting that he might have fabricated the whole story or been influenced by contemporary UFO stories, he consistently maintained the veracity of his account until his death in 1991. Filiberto Cardenas abduction. On the evening of January 3, 1979, Filiberto Cardenas, a resident of Hialeah, Florida, was at his gift shop when he received a call from his friend, Fernando Marti, who requested his help in purchasing a pig for a roast. Along with Marti, his wife Mirta, Isabel, and their daughter Isabel, they drove around local farms but were unsuccessful in finding a pig. They then continued their search along a rural road, where their vehicle suddenly lost power and came to a stop. Attempts to restart the car then failed, as the engine, lights, and electrical systems appeared to be completely unresponsive. While investigating the issue under the hood, both men noticed really unusual phenomenon, being that the engine was reflecting sequences of red and violet light, accompanied by a sound resembling a swarm of bees. The intensity of these lights and sounds then increased, causing the vehicle to shake. This prompted Mirta Marti to protect herself and her daughter by covering them on the backseat, mistaking the event for seismic activity because of her past traumatic experiences with earthquakes. And amidst the chaos, Filiberto attempted to approach the Martis to help, but found himself suddenly paralyzed, unable to move as if restrained by an unseen force. Simultaneously, Fernando experienced a similar paralysis while trying to shield himself under the hood. The situation then escalated when Filiberto was lifted into the air, despite his protests and cries for help. Fernando, momentarily immobilized, witnessed Filiberto ascending into what he described later as a bulky object or UFO, which then ascended and moved away rapidly. In a panic, Fernando managed to start the car after several attempts and decided to seek help. He initially hesitated to involve the police, fearing disbelief and misunderstanding about the extraordinary nature of the incident. However, recognizing the severity of the situation, he eventually contacted the authorities from a nearby service station and informed them of the incident, stating that a light took Filiberto away, as quoted. Meanwhile, Filiberto found himself on a different highway, disoriented and far from the original location of the incident. He was then discovered by a patrolling officer, initially mistaken for a victim of assault due to his confused state and his inability to communicate effectively in English. He was then taken to a local police station for assistance. The police investigation into Filiberto's sudden reappearance categorized the event as a close encounter of the third kind, making it one of the rare instances where law enforcement officially acknowledged the possibility of an alien abduction. This classification stemmed from the bizarre circumstances surrounding Filiberto's disappearance and subsequent return, as well as the physical evidence and eyewitness accounts supporting the encounter. During the period of his absence, Filiberto reported being aboard an alien spacecraft, which he was subjected to various examinations and communicated with through a device that altered the language spoken by the entities to one he could understand. He described the interior of the craft and the beings, which conducted tests on him that left multiple marks on his body. The entities showed him visual projections of past, present, and future events and conveyed messages about global and cosmic significance. Kofu 1975 Fanged Humanoids. On February 23, 1975, in Kofu, Japan, two 7-year-old boys, Masato Kawano and Katsuhiro Yamahata, allegedly experienced a close encounter with extraterrestrial beings. The incident occurred near the Hinode housing estate as the boys were roller skating. They noticed two orange UFOs in the sky, and one larger object moved towards Mount Atago, while the smaller descended behind a vineyard. Driven by curiosity, the boys approached the landed craft. They observed it transform from a luminous orange to a metallic silver disc, about 7 feet high and 15 feet in diameter, resting on 3 spherical legs. The craft featured alien script along its surface. As they neared, a hatch opened, which deployed a ladder to the ground. From the craft then emerged a humanoid figure, with another smaller being visible inside the vessel. The exterior humanoid was about 4 feet tall and wore a reflective silver uniform. Unlike other reported entities with concealed features, this being's skin was dark brown, heavily wrinkled, and it sported 3 metallic fangs, each about 2 inches long. This description somewhat aligns with other accounts of wrinkled extraterrestrial beings. As the humanoid explored the area, it suddenly turned, placing a hand on Yamahata's shoulder, causing him to collapse, possibly from fear or an induced paralytic state, which is a common report in close encounters. Kawano, in a brave response, managed to carry Yamahata away from the scene. The boys then returned home distressed and reported the incident to their mothers, who followed them back to the site. There, they observed an orange light pulsating in the vineyard for about 5 minutes before the craft abruptly ascended, emitting a blinding light. The incident caught the attention of their classmates and school officials the following day. Kawano and Yamahata recounted their experience and provided drawings of their encounter, which led to a school-led investigation at the site. Investigators found concrete posts pushed over and landing traces consistent with the boys' descriptions. A school teacher reported detecting radioactivity too within a circular soil pattern at the landing site. Despite thorough interviews by parents, school authorities, and ufologist Masaru Mori, the boys' accounts remained consistent. Skeptics, including the Civil Aviation Bureau, dismissed the UFO as being airplane lights, although this explanation does not account for the humanoid sightings or physical traces left at the scene. Garson Invaders. The Garson Invaders incident reportedly took place on July 2, 1954, near Garson, a small community in Canada. Ennio La Sarza, a 23-year-old miner of Italian descent, was a primary witness to this event. Before this incident, La Sarza had expressed a distinct disinterest in science fiction, including any topics related to UFOs or extraterrestrial beings. His unexpected encounter significantly altered his perspective though. According to La Zarza, on that late afternoon around 5 p.m., he encountered an unidentified flying object while at a field near his workplace. The craft he described was spherical, about 25 feet in diameter, equipped with what appears to be landing gear and a retractable antenna atop its structure. The object also featured a set of portholes around its circumference, suggesting a more complex internal structure. The most startling aspect of La Zarza's encounter, though, was his descriptions of the beings that emerged from this spacecraft. These entities, reportedly 3 in number, were described as colossal, standing about 13 feet tall. They possessed bluish-green skin and a unique facial color and texture that La Zarza claimed he had never seen before. Each of these beings had a single eye located centrally on their foreheads, giving them a sort of cyclopean appearance. Also, they had 6 arms each, evenly spaced around their bodies, with each hand featuring crab-like claws. One of the most extraordinary claims though about this encounter was the nature of the interaction between La Zarza and the entities. He reported that as one of the beings, the presumed leader, approached him, he experienced what he could only describe as a psychic blow. This interaction suggests a form of non-verbal, possibly telepathic communication, or an attempt at such, which left La Zarza feeling overwhelmed and terrified. Following this incident, La Zarza reported the event, which eventually caught the attention of local media and much later ufologists and researchers investigating claims of extraterrestrial contact. And despite the initial skepticism, the detailed consistency of La Zarza's account and the physical evidence noted in the landing area lent some credence to his claims. Investigators who then visited the site reported disturbances in the soil and vegetation patterns consistent with heavy, possibly technologically advanced machinery. Also, there were reports of anomalies in the local magnetic field and residual radiation levels that were higher than the norm, which some researchers took as supporting evidence of an unnatural phenomenon. McMinnville UFO photographs. The McMinnville UFO photographs are among the most scrutinized and debated images in the history of UFO sightings. Taken by Paul and Evelyn Trent on their farm near McMinnville, Oregon on May 11, 1950, these images have led to extensive investigation and analysis over the years. The incident began on a quiet evening at the Trent farm, located just outside Sheridan, Oregon, not far from McMinnville. Evelyn Trent first noticed the unusual aerial object while returning to her house after feeding rabbits. The object appeared as a metallic, dish-shaped craft moving slowly across the sky. Alerted by Evelyn, Paul Trent retrieved a camera and managed to capture 2 photographs of the object before it accelerated and vanished to the west. The photographs depict a saucer-shaped object with a distinct and reflective surface suspended in the sky. Following the sighting, the Trents were hesitant to develop the film, fearing the implications of capturing potential evidence of extraterrestrial technology. The film was finally processed days later though, mixed with mundane family photos from Mother's Day. Initially, the Trents kept the incident private, fearing repercussions. However, the story in the photographs eventually reached the local newspaper, the McMinnville Telephone Register, through a bank acquainted with the Trents. The publication of the photographs on June 8, 1950, propelled the images to national prominence, with the story picked up by major news outlets and featured in Life magazine. The credibility of the photographs sparked a lot of debates among skeptics and UFO researchers. Initial examinations by local reporters and later by ufologists found no evidence of tampering or manipulation. Bruce Maccabee, an optical physicist and ufologist, conducted a thorough photometric analysis and concluded that the object was a large, distant physical object, not a small, close model or a hoax. His analysis suggested that the brightness and sharpness of the object indicated that it wasn't suspended by wires or any support that would imply a staged photograph. However, skepticism still persisted. Noted skeptics like Philip J. Klass and Robert Schaefer suggested that the object could have been a small object suspended by wires, pointing to inconsistencies in the lighting and shadows, which they claim indicated that the photographs were taken in the morning rather than in the evening, as the Trents had stated. They also proposed that the object's resemblance to the side view mirror of vehicles from the period might indicate a terrestrial origin of the photographed object. And further adding to the complexity, the Condon Committee, a university-based project that evaluated UFO reports in the late 1960s, received the original negatives for analysis. William Hartman, an astronomer with the committee, initially supported the hypothesis that the photos were genuine, noting consistent physical and photographic evidence. Yet, he also acknowledged the possibility that the object could have been a model. Years later, the negatives were re-examined using more advanced techniques, and again the analysis were mixed, with some researchers reaffirming the authenticity of the photographs as depicting an unexplained object, while others bolstered the hoax theory. Finnish Air Force UFO sighting. The Finnish Air Force UFO sighting in 1969 is one of the rare instances where a military organization has openly acknowledged the presence of an unidentified flying object during an operation. This event took place on April 12, 1969 during a routine training mission at Pori Airport, which is located in the western part of Finland. The incident involves multiple sightings by both radar operators and pilots. During the training session, a flight controller at Pori Airport instructed Tarmo Tokeva, a pilot in training, to investigate a group of 7 objects described as air balloons floating at an altitude between 1,500 and 3,000 meters. Upon approaching the objects, Tokeva observed that they were ball or disc shaped, which already deviated from the typical characteristics of conventional air balloons. The object's ability to accelerate rapidly away from his aircraft further puzzled him, as this behavior was not consistent with known aircraft or any lighter-than-air vehicles like balloons. And as Tokeva attempted to close the distance, he reported that the object sped away at greater speeds, eluding further investigation. This encounter was accompanied by radar contact reports from another location about 200 kilometers away in Vasa, where undefined radar images were captured. This added another layer to the mystery, as it suggested that the objects were not isolated to a single observer, but were detected by different sensors over a significant geographical area. Joko Koronen, another pilot in training, corroborated the sighting. He was not directly involved, but overheard the radio communications and also observed the objects from a distance. His account supported Tokeva's observations and confirmed the unusual nature of the incident. The Finnish military's magazine, Ruotovaki, later reported that the sighting was also not unique. There had been similar reports over bodies of water during military exercises, which they speculated might have been due to transnational reconnaissance activities. The suggestion was that these objects could be spy planes or unknown aircraft from another nation, surveilling Finnish military activities. Alderney Yellow Light. The Alderney Yellow Light is a mysterious phenomenon that occurred on April 23, 2007 off the coast of the British island of Alderney. This incident is particularly notable because it was observed by 2 separate airline pilots from different aircraft. The pilots reported seeing an unusual object or light described as bright yellow that significantly deviated from typical aircraft behaviors and characteristics. During the sighting, Captain Ray Bauer, a pilot for Origini Air Services, was flying a routine flight from Southampton when he first noticed the unusual object. According to his account, the object appeared to be up to a mile wide, which he initially observed from about 30 miles away from the island and at an altitude of about 4,000 feet. As he approached the object, it appeared to be stationary and was located about 2,000 feet up in the air. This sighting lasted about just 9 minutes, which allowed Captain Bauer to observe and describe the object in detail. The object was characterized by its bright yellow color and was described as sharp and thin with a green area, a description that doesn't correspond with conventional aircraft. Captain Bauer also noticed a second similar object further to the west, which looked smaller and was closer to the island of Guernsey. The size and behavior of these objects, particularly the ability to remain stationary and then accelerate away rapidly, were unlike any known aircraft. The incident also coincided with radar anomalies reported 200 kilometers away in Vasa, where undetermined radar images were captured, suggesting that the phenomenon might not have been isolated to the immediate vicinity of Alderney. However, the radar systems in Jersey didn't pick up the objects, which could indicate either a limitation in the radar technology or the possibility that the objects were not composed of materials typically detectable by radar. Another pilot flying for Blue Islands also reported seeing a similar object around the same time, which corroborated Captain Bauer's observations. This pilot described the object as being behind him and to his left as he passed near the island of Sark. And the consistency in the pilot's descriptions from different perspectives lends further weight to these accounts. The air traffic controller on duty, Paul Kelly, received reports from both pilots and confirmed that the descriptions of the object's location and characteristics were consistent, despite the pilots observing from opposite sides. This detail is crucial as it rules out the possibility of a mistaken sighting of a conventional object from just one vantage point. Varginha Devil. The Varginha Devil, also known as Varginha's Extraterrestrial, refers to an extraterrestrial sighting that profoundly impacted the city of Varginha, Brazil on January 20th, 1996. This incident is considered one of Brazil's most intriguing UFO and alien sightings and has drawn comparisons to the Roswell incident in its notoriety and the level of attention it attracted. The event began when 3 young women encountered a creature while walking through a suburban area of Varginha. They described seeing a humanoid figure around 5 feet tall with dark brown, oily skin, a large head, and a very slender body. Most distinctively though, the creature had large red eyes and 3 protrusions on its head, which could be described as horn-like or crest-like bumps. It didn't appear to have a visible mouth though. The women, startled and convinced that they had seen the devil, quickly fled the scene and reported their encounter to local authorities. Following the initial sighting, several more people in Varginha reported seeing similar creatures or experiencing other unexplained phenomena like strange lights in the sky. Twin Falls Saucer. On July 11, 1947, amidst a nationwide frenzy of alleged flying disc sightings that began with Kenneth Arnold's famous report, the residents of Twin Falls, Idaho became embroiled in their own local encounter. The incident was marked by the discovery of a 30-inch disc that was later revealed to be a hoax. The events unfolded during a period known as the 1947 flying disc craze, which was characterized by numerous reports of unidentified flying objects across the country. The initial excitement in Twin Falls was fueled by multiple sightings reported by credible witnesses, including a forest ranger and his companion who observed multiple discs in a V-shaped formation over Galena Summit. These sightings were widely covered by local press and added to the growing national intrigue over UFOs. The disc found in Twin Falls, though, was reported to have made a thudding sound upon impact, linked to its discovery by a neighbor the following morning. Local police then quickly secured the object, and it wasn't long before FBI and military intelligence were involved. The intense scrutiny and secrecy that followed fled into the public's curiosity and speculation about the object's origins. However, the mystery was short-lived. The very next day, on July 12th, it was revealed that the disc was a hoax fabricated by local teenagers. The contraption was described as being crafted from radio tubes, electric coils, and wires housed beneath a plexiglass dome on one side and a metal dome on the other. Despite its convincing appearance from a distance, close inspection revealed its mundane construction, which included materials such as stove bolts. The revelation of the hoax had a significant impact on public perception. It not only deflated the local excitement, but also contributed to a national decline in UFO reporting. The Sandown Clown. The Sandown Clown, also known as Sam, is one of the most mysterious and lesser known figures of potential extraterrestrial encounters. This occurrence happened on May 1973 on the Isle of Wight, specifically in the vicinity of Lake Common near the town of Sandown, a place otherwise known for its nice beaches and historical significance dating back to Roman times. The primary account of the Sandown Clown encounter comes from the British UFO Research Association, which detailed the experiences of 2 children referred to here as Faye and Harry. These young vacationers reportedly encountered an unusual figure after following a mysterious, silent-like noise across a golf course to a swampy area near Sandown Airport. The figure, described as almost 7 feet tall without a discernible neck and dressed in a bizarre assembly of clothes including a yellow pointed hat and a green tunic, emerged from under a bridge. This entity, which the children named Sam, exhibited characteristics both mechanical and organic in nature, confusing the witnesses and subsequent investigators. Sam's physical description alone raised some questions about his origins and nature. His skin appeared unnaturally white and paper-like, with facial features that seemed painted on, being triangular markings for eyes and a square for a nose. His attire was also mysterious, being wooden antennae on his head and limbs, and his movements were described as awkward and unnatural, almost like a hopping motion. Sam communicated through a microphone attached to a black knob device, suggesting a reliance on mechanical aids to interact. During their encounter, Sam referred to himself as all colors, a statement that might imply a non-human origin or an existence beyond normal visual perception. He also expressed fear of humans and mentioned a non-confrontational nature, indicating a peaceful disposition or perhaps a directive to avoid confrontation. The children noted that Sam ate berries in an unusual manner, which further fueled his alien-like characteristics, and his dwelling was described as a metallic hut with no windows, covered inside with dials and resembling a control panel, which might suggest a temporary shelter or a research outpost. Theories about Sam's identity range from an extraterrestrial visitor, a ghostly apparition, a human in an elaborate costume, to more esoteric suggestions like a shared hallucination or a manifestation of folklore. Each theory has its merits and flaws though. The extraterrestrial theory is supported by the high strangeness of Sam's behavior and technology, while the ghost theory aligns with the sudden disappearance and ethereal presence. The possibility of a human hoaxer can't be entirely ruled out though, given the physical artifacts described, though the complexity and risk of such a prank would be extraordinarily high. A psychological or shared hallucination, while plausible, would require a trigger which remains unidentified. Tuscumbia Space Penguins. In the midst of a winter in 1967, an incident unfolded in Tuscumbia, Missouri. On February 14th, Claude Edwards, a 64-year-old farmer known for his pragmatic disposition, embarked on his routine morning chores, unaware that his day would veer into the realms of the extraordinary. Edwards was deeply rooted in the practicalities of rural life and harbored a strong skepticism towards UFOs and alien lore, encountered what he would describe as a group of entities that bore a resemblance to green space penguins. As Edwards ventured across his property that morning, a sight in his east field caught his attention, being a bizarre mushroom-shaped object that seemed out of place amidst the normal landscape of Missouri. This object, characterized by its grayish-green hue and a distinct lack of conventional aircraft features such as wings or a tail, rested in the meadow adjacent to his barn, surrounded by an equally peculiar group of small creatures. These entities, about 3 feet in height, exhibited a frantic energy as they scurried beneath the strange craft. Edwards described them as having a greenish complexion that matched the craft, with arms that appeared to be in constant motion, possibly too quick for the human eye to clearly discern their form. And it said that they possessed large, black, goggle-like eyes, and their facial features included dark protuberances where one would expect to find a nose and mouth, though it was unclear whether these were natural features or some sort of apparatus. And driven by curiosity and a desire to protect his property, Edwards approached the intruders. However, as he neared the object, he encountered an invisible barrier that prevented him from advancing further. This force field was imperceptible both visually and tangibly, yet the pressure exerted was undeniable, stopping Edwards in his tracks as he attempted to reach the craft with rocks in hand, aiming to disrupt its structure and function. The farmer's efforts to engage physically with the object was futile, being the rocks he threw were either repelled by the invisible barrier or harmlessly skipped over the craft. It was during these moments of interaction that the creatures swiftly retreated into the craft, which then began to ascend silently, tilting towards Edwards in a manner that suggested a form of non-verbal communication or perhaps a warning. This silent and rapid departure left Edwards alone in the field, the morning stillness returning as the craft disappeared into the distance towards St. Elizabeth. The encounter, which lasted between 5 to 10 minutes, left a lasting impression on Edwards and a physical trace on his land. The area where the craft had rested showed signs of dehydration, distinguishing it from the surrounding terrain. Old Saybrook Blockheads Encounter. In the early hours of December 16, 1957, in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, a retired teacher named Mrs. Mary M. Starr experienced an extraterrestrial sighting. The encounter started when Mrs. Starr was awakened by bright light shining through her bedroom window around 2 to 3 in the morning. Initially mistaking it for a downed airplane, she quickly realized that the object was hovering motionless above her clothesline, presenting a scenario far from anything mundane or identifiable as human-made aircraft. Mrs. Starr described observing a craft with large square windows through which she could see the interior and its occupants. Inside, she witnessed two unusual entities moving past one another, and it said that they raised their right arms, which were featureless and handless, suggesting a form of nonverbal communication or perhaps a function of their navigation. These beings, known as the Old Saybrook Blockheads, due to their distinctive head shape, had heads that appeared as transparent cubes with bright red cores. Their bodies seemed rubbery and flared outward like skirts, and it was unclear whether they possessed legs, as Mrs. Starr could only see their upper bodies. The beings were estimated to be less than 4 feet tall, which added to their non-humanoid and mysterious nature. The craft itself underwent several transformative and unexplained phenomena when Mrs. Starr watched. After the beings moved out of sight, the windows of the craft had vanished without leaving any trace. Subsequently, a sparkling antenna emerged from one end of the craft, and the entire hull began to emit a glow that lasted several minutes. This glow, coupled with the emergence of the antenna, suggested some type of energy or propulsion activity was occurring, possibly preparing the craft for departure. And the final phase of the setting involved the craft's departure, being that the glow eventually faded, the antenna retracted, and the object maneuvered through the air in a complicated path before ascending vertically into the sky at a remarkable speed, all without producing any audible sound. This silent propulsion technology and the craft's ability to disappear swiftly into the night sky indicate a level of technological advancement far beyond human capabilities at the time. Also 1. On October 25, 1974, Carl Higdon, a 41-year-old oil well driller and avid hunter from Rawlings, decided to spend his day off hunting elk in Medicine Bow National Park, Wyoming. The incident began when Higdon aimed at a large male elk and fired his rifle. To his astonishment, though, there was no recoil and the gun discharged silently. He observed the bullet move slowly through the air, as if passing through an invisible barrier or dense medium, before it fell to the ground far short of his target. And as Higdon proceeded this anomaly, he was approached by a being that defied all familiar biological categorizations. The creature, which introduced itself as Also One, initiated contact with the simple question, "How you doing?" Despite the surreal situation. Higdon managed to reply, "Pretty good," trying to maintain composure. The creature then inquired if Higdon was hungry and offered him 4 pills, which floated towards him in a clear cellophane package. Also One appeared humanoid, standing about 6 feet tall, but his features were anything but human. He wore a skin-tight black outfit similar to a diver's wetsuit, covered with harness-like straps and a metallic belt featuring a large yellow 6-pointed star. His head bore coarse hair, resembling straw rather than natural hair, and his face seamlessly transitioned into his neck, lacking any discernible lips or ears. And instead of hands, he had a pointed, drill-bit like appendage protruding from his wrist on one side. The entity then invited Higdon to come aboard its cube-like spacecraft, which caught the sunlight in the clearing behind him. Accepting the invitation then led to a rapid escalation of events. Higdon found himself inside the craft, which he described as boxy and unconventional in design. He recounted that the alien gave him a tour of what was claimed to be Also One's home planet, an experience that profoundly altered his perception of reality and time. The entire encounter raised a lot of questions about the nature and intent of Also One and his species. Higdon then returned from the experience with only the distorted bullet casing as physical evidence, the lead part of the bullet having vanished. This artifact, along with Higdon's detailed testimony, has been subjects of analysis and speculation among UFO researchers and enthusiasts.